In 2009, Spike TV, when it was actually legitimately good and watchable, had the idea of what would happen if you decided to pit two historical figures who never met in history to fight against one another in a match to determine who is the Deadliest Warrior. So hi, welcome to End Credit Reviews on an episode of kind of after the credits on End Credit Reviews. This is Tyler from End Credit Reviews.
And Steven from Steven Lawson Studios.
And yes, and this is our review on the TV show Deadliest Warrior. Now the thing about Deadliest Warrior is the fact that originally I was going to review this solo. However, because Steven was also a fan of this show as well, because he said that I kind of got him into that show, I was like, okay, I think it'd be interesting if we both gave our thoughts on this show. So I'm gonna let Steven introduce himself.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I remember when I was just meeting Tyler, we liked a few of the same things, and then he talked to me about the show Deadliest Warrior, and I go, okay, I'll actually check that out. I was looking for something to watch at that particular time, and I was very impressed at what it was. I mean, for a TV show, some of the production value was fairly decent, and it was a cool concept that is something kind of like that a lot of YouTube channels along the lines of other fictional characters have since kind of copied and pasted. So I thought it was a cool concept and a very cool show. And honestly, it's a shame that it, at a certain point was canceled fairly early. I mean, it wasn't, like a season one hard cancel, but that's one that kind of, to me, defined Spike. And it was sad to see that go. And I'd love to see it back personally. It might actually give me an excuse to watch that channel again. But
yeah, I'll get to that later. So basically the show's premise was like, okay, not premise, but the whole story behind it was like, what would happen if you had a ninja versus Spartan? Who would win? Who would win between, let's say, a Nazi Waffen SS squad against a squad of Viet Cong? Who would win? And also historical figures like William Wallace versus Shaka Zulu. Who would win? Mm-hmm. And basically they had these various people on the show as kind of the recurring hosts, and also they would do the data, wherever you want to pronounce it, and they would have these so-called experts come in and test the weaponry out, and it was very interesting for its time. There was some idiot, I remember on Wikipedia it shows like, according to Brian Lowry, described the show as 90% filler, and it makes a Universal Studios stunt show look like a masterpiece theater. Okay, I gotta say, to quote the president right now, you are fake news. Because this show was very educational, which something that I didn't really think of when I decided to watch this show. I wasn't thinking that it was going to be like the History Channel at the time when the History Channel was about history still. Right. The show itself was very educational because we learned a lot of things, such as the history. Okay, there's a lot of history of the show. We learned a lot about the history of the various fighters on the show, and okay, when did this happen, this battle happen. So yeah, it was very much educational in the sense of history, but also there was a lot of science involved with measuring the explosions, about like, okay, this impact would kill someone, this would just injure them, and they would measure the pressure per square inch, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And also there's a lot of medical stuff in it too, because there was this one expert on the show, which I'm trying to remember his name is Dr. Armand Dorian. He is a real life doctor who usually works in the ER in Los Angeles, at least in the time when the show was on, and he was the one who would go up to every type of gel torso and would say like, okay, this would kill, this would just injure them, and he would describe exactly what would happen, like if they would bleed out, and he was a very interesting character. The other characters in the show was Jeff Desmond. I'm trying to remember what his background is, but he was kind of the closest thing to a host, but he would also, kind of do different measurements and that. We had Max Geiger, who was in the first 2 seasons, who was kind of like the computer guy, and he had his own simulation thing. But then he left the show after the second season because he was offered to produce a video game called The Unfinished Swan, which was a PlayStation exclusive. So then they got this one guy known as Richard Makowitz, who was a former Navy SEAL. And I was surprised to find out that he died over a year ago.
Really?
I had no idea. Yeah, he became the replacement for Max Geiger. He was an interesting character, and I think he died of a brain tumor.
Oh man.
Or something like that. And yeah, I was surprised, like, what? He died? And then on top of that, the first season was narrated by David Winham, who was the narrator for 300.
Oh yeah, sure.
And Van Helsing, I don't want to go to Transylvania. From, Van Helsing as Carl the Friar.
Right. Yeah, I like that guy quite a bit, actually. So that's interesting. I didn't put that together. I do voiceover stuff myself, and that should have clicked with me. But yeah, now that you say it, it makes a lot of sense that was him.
Yeah, I don't know exactly who narrated the rest of the series, or they got someone else, or maybe just recycled dialogue of his own, or maybe remained uncredited. I'm not so sure. But anyway, the show was very entertaining. Back in high school, we would debate who would win. And I remember one time I wrote down, okay, who do you think is going to win tonight? And then one of the douchebag guys at the table drew a penis.
Yep. Oh, I remember that too. That was so him. We're not going to name names, but that was right up his alley.
Yeah, or up somewhere else, but
yeah.
I guess. So the first season of Deadliest Warrior was only about 9 episodes, and one of my favorite episodes of that season was the IRA versus the Taliban, and I did show you that clip before recording.
Yep.
That part where they're in the RV, and he sees one of them about to shoot an RPG, and one guy's like, ah! I've got a question for Steven, I'll answer it myself as well.
Sure.
What was your favorite episode or favorite episodes of Deadliest Warrior, and why?
I mean, honestly, I still think for me, it often still comes back to my favorite is probably Spartan versus Ninja, or just in general the Out for Blood special, I think you said it was called.
Back for Blood.
Back for Blood special. Where it was a whole bunch of some of the deadliest warriors, kind of like in a tier list of a tournament. And the Spartan came out on top. And I don't remember if it came down to the Samurai versus the Spartan.
Yeah.
I think that was it. But it made me kind of reconsider, what I was thinking, because I kind of had this vision of, samurais and ninjas obviously have a whole lot of martial arts that can set them ahead of a lot of, the Anglo-Saxon or whatever European fighter that kind of just slugs away to a certain extent with blunt instruments. So I thought that would set them ahead. But then the science behind, no, at the end of the day, a shield's a shield. And if your toys can't get past it, you're going to get your ass beat. And
or slashed.
Yeah, seriously. And that was one of the definitive moments in Deadliest Warrior where it kind of just made me think, yeah, this is super factual and just, it makes sense. There were a couple episodes that I remember thinking, I'm not sure if I quite agree, and it came down to I think they tended to be groups of special forces, ones like KGB versus CIA sort of thing. I don't remember if it was that specific one, but there have been a couple questionable ones when it came to, and we decided this number of people versus this number of people. That, to me, was a little hairy, but especially some of the historical figure ones where it's one-on-one death match, I think were very fun, and how they simulated it. It just felt in the spirit of Spike TV, very masculine, very raw, and although sometimes it was a bit over the top, I thought it was a lot of fun. So those were probably some of my favorites.
Okay. All right, some of my favorite episodes. Okay. I gotta say my favorite episode would have to be the Vlad the Impaler versus Sun Tzu one, because I really like both of these historical figures. There's a lot to learn from them when it comes to strategy and history in general.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really fun. I just liked it a lot, especially seeing Vlad's like killage sword just like cut through a pig with just one swing at ease. And I remember showing Steven that, and the look on his face was just utter shock and awe.
Yep.
Yeah. It's almost like a real life lightsaber.
It is. It's crazy. It just phased through it like nothing. Bones and everything just rip.
And then he like kills Sun Tzu, spoiler here. In like, okay, the worst way to die on that show was the impalement through the butt.
Mm-hmm.
And one that I was like, that was kind of unfair, because it was like you had one guy with guns and the other guy didn't have guns. Was the pirate versus the knight episode? I think I'm like, okay, that was kind of stupid, a little unfair.
Yeah.
I really do like the SWAT versus GSG-9 episode. Was very interesting. A lot of interesting and various plot twists and turns.
I do recall I liked that one quite a bit. Sorry to interrupt, but
okay.
Yeah.
And the Ming Warriors versus the French Musketeers one was very entertaining as well. However, of course, like any versus show, there's going to be agreement and disagreement on there.
Mm-hmm.
And I gotta say the two episodes that I disagreed with the most was that one of them was the William the Conqueror versus Joan of Arc. And they said Joan of Arc would win. That felt like a complete BS decision, because, okay, first of all, Joan of Arc was not really a warrior. She was more like someone that the French looked up to, and her being a warrior was likely just French propaganda during the 100 Years' War. Second, let's look at the physical, factual statistics here.
Yeah.
William the Conqueror is a much bigger, stronger guy who's faster in his just chainmail stuff, has far more battle experience compared to Joan of Arc, who is a teenage girl who is much smaller, weaker, and probably slower in that heavy armor of hers. Okay, who do you think would win? Okay, who has far less battle experience.
Mary Sue versus realistically.
Yeah, the Star Wars movies by Disney recently.
No, I absolutely agree that I was trying to remember, because I was thinking, was it Alexander the Great? It was someone great. But yeah, I do think similarly to you that was an episode that was very, very wrong. Like, just, kind of all of a sudden not facts based.
Yeah, there was definitely an agenda behind that one.
Mm-hmm.
But the other episode that I disagreed with was the whole Green Berets versus Russian Spetsnaz, particularly on the weapon tests of the spring knife, that when you pull it, the knife blade shoots out, versus the military kind of mini shovel. Mm-hmm. And I think they overrepresented that knife, because, okay, do you know how good of an aim you have to be to specifically shoot that knife thing at the jugular? Even if you get a lot of training with it, you know how hard that is to do, especially with a trained soldier is not going to stand still like that.
Yeah.
And with something like the shovel, you can keep using that over and over again. With that knife, when you shoot that, it becomes useless.
Fair point.
And I hate how Dr. Armandorian compared to a gardening tool. Yeah, I bet if he got hit by that, he wouldn't call it a gardening tool.
Very true. Another one of my favorites, honestly, largely because I knew one but didn't know the other, was I think we were talking the Roman centurion versus the Rajput warrior.
Oh yeah,
the Rajput warriors. Their weapons are insane. Like, I had no idea they even existed, and it's like, a whip made of blades? Yes, please.
But the problem with that weapon was that it didn't really kill. It was more like a pain one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, one last thing before we get on to the ending of the show, like why it got canceled, was I remember we had it was the Comanche versus the Mongol. And I forget the name of the guy who came in to represent the Comanche, but he always had this bit of himself like, yeah, this is the weaponry right here in that, yeah. And, he was using all these, like, weapons, like, yeah, look how long the spear is and that sort of thing, yeah. I mean, this guy obviously is compensating for something he's lacking in.
Oh yeah.
I'm not saying what it is, but I'm like, yep, this guy, you're trying too hard.
Yes, Mr. Tryhard. There's always one.
Yeah, and of course there was the Deadliest Warrior video game, which I do have on digital still on my PS3. And yeah, it's very fun and entertaining. Some people complain that, oh, it's too short in that because some fights can be done within 5 seconds. But that was the whole point of the game. It was supposed to be realistic.
Yeah.
And that. Alright, so why exactly did the show get canceled? Because it was very popular at the time when it came out. But here is the thing about it. According to... I mean, the show lasted from the spring of 2009 to the fall of 2011. So basically, it was the later half of my high school years.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't announced by Spike TV that the show was canceled. It was announced on one of the people who worked on the show, like Jeff Desmond, I don't know how you pronounce his last name, announced on his Twitter account that it was canceled when he was asked. That is such a dumb decision by Spike TV. They didn't even have any kind of decency to let people know the show was canceled. One of the guys who worked on the show said, oh yeah, it's canceled on his Twitter account.
That is pretty dumb.
And unprofessional. And they said, and from what I've heard, some people said that, oh, it got canceled because it was too expensive, like a 24 situation where the show kept getting more expensive to make, even though the viewership was pretty good. And I think that might be a little BS because I'm like, okay, the show is more expensive because I could tell by the third season they were spending more money. Why not just cut the cost of some of the stuff and keep the show running since the viewership is very good? Personally, I thought that was just a cover story for Spike TV because obviously they wanted to go in a different direction because now it's just the lowest common denominator with like reality shows like Bar Rescue and stupid game show stuff like Lip Sync Battle.
Detestable. Not even a, ostensibly male network anymore,
Yeah, remember when Spike TV was like the man's network, kind of like what the Hallmark Channel is for women?
Yeah, literally, that was their, I think, catchphrase, basically. I forgot exactly what it was, but it bragged about being, shows for men.
Yeah, remember Mansers?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was a show that, yeah, I know I can understand why people said that show was dumb, but it was somewhat educational. I mean, it was not as educational like Deadliest Warrior, but it had something you could learn about and also kind of laugh at with Mansers.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, Spike TV was like, yeah, the man's channel. But then it was like, oh, well, we got some soy in us now. So we're going to go a little bit this way. And sadly, it suffers the same fate as the History Channel, going away from what it was originally supposed to be, and now it's just reality show and
garbage.
And, other garbage, exactly.
Hot trash. But, I agree. And part of me also wonders if it may have been, completely different show here, but I know, for example, the creators of South Park for a long time have been talking about, we're going to quit any minute now. Meanwhile, they could have just up and done it out of nowhere for this show. So, there could be creative differences between people to a certain point, but if they have a big fan base, you really owe it to the fans to not be a jerk and, just cut cold turkey. You should warn them, hey, we're thinking about, closing up shop here pretty soon. So they can at least have some warning. And that was a situation where I remember Tyler just saying, oh, it's canceled. And it's like, what? That show's canceled? That was awesome. I was waiting for so many more awesome historical beatdowns.
Yeah. But who knows? If Young Justice can come back from the dead, and if a show like Penny Dreadful is coming back from the dead as well, apparently, maybe this one someday can come back as like a remake or a reboot of some kind or another. Who knows if that will happen in the future? So, what would you give Deadliest Warrior, Steven?
Well, Deadliest Warrior was, to me, of course, not a perfect show, but it was very fun, and it was, similar to the shows, in a way, based on a lot of fact and stuff and analyzing of history, to something you'd see on the History Channel, which you said, and I liked all those things. There were some over-the-top moments and some things, of course, that we don't disagree or we don't agree with. For one reason or another. But it was definitely probably my favorite show on Spike, and a real fun one that kind of set the standard for lots of versus shows down the road. So I really appreciate it for that. And with all those things in mind, I would say, to give this, I don't have an exact number, but I would say somewhere between 84 and 86% would be roughly what I'd give it. Kind of a mid B to upper B, because it doesn't have the marks of an A+ show, but it was definitely fun entertainment that you can consistently come back to and have a good time.
Well, personally, I think the show itself, it was a very entertaining show. I mean, at one point a while back, I heard there were talks about actually making a movie, which would have been weird and strange.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was, again, very entertaining, but also was very educational. Not in the way that you would think it would be, but yeah, it is very much like that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there are definitely parts where I disagreed with the outcome, which, it's going to be a 50-50 chance whenever that happens. Whether you'd be watching, I don't know, a sports game, one side or the other, one's gotta lose, one's gotta win, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And with this one, it was very entertaining, and again, there was a lot of history to it, there was a lot of science to it, and medical stuff, and so on. And I did like the consistent, reoccurring characters on the show itself, and again, it was very entertaining for what it was. Part of me is kind of conflicted what to give this show at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And as for the show Deadliest Warrior, I would give it about 4 to 4.5 stars out of 5. So anyway, this is Tyler from End Credit Reviews.
And Steven from Steven Lawson Studios.
And we hope you enjoyed this episode of After the Credits on End Credit Reviews. And we hope to make a lot more in the future. Please like and subscribe. So what did you think of that zombie episode, Steven? Versus vampire one.
That was pretty goofy, I thought, to be completely honest,
At least they weren't wearing tight pilgrim outfits from the Gap.
Very true. It would have been fun to watch them be eaten alive if that was the case, but
yeah, we were rooting for the zombies.
for sure.
Footage from Black Friday.
Oh no.